You have come here tonight with the assumption that empathy is a virtue, a gift of the soul, a bridge to the suffering of others, and yet I must stand before you as a surgeon of the psyche, as a cartographer of the unconscious, and tell you that the very gift which makes you tender, which makes you feel the pulse of another's pain, may also become the most dangerous trap. For in the labyrinths of the psyche, no light is pure without shadow, and no virtue is free from corruption. The empath who absorbs the sorrows of the world may, under the dominion of unconscious forces, become the criminal empath, the one who does not simply feel, but is compelled to act out the darkness he has swallowed. We live in an age intoxicated by sentimentality, where to feel is mistaken for to know, and to sympathize is confused with to understand. But empathy, when unchecked by consciousness, can open the floodgates of the unconscious, and there dwell the archaic powers, the primal instincts, the shadow that every man and woman carries like a silent twin. If you do not face your shadow, if you do not integrate it, then your empathic sensitivity can become its mouthpiece, its weapon. You will think you are saving, while in truth you are enslaved. Consider the case of a man whose dreams were haunted by a shadowy figure. Night after night, he saw a black silhouette standing at the edge of his vision. It never spoke, never moved, but its silence carried a command that could not be resisted. He was not a violent man by nature. His friends called him gentle, soft-spoken, one who felt too much, but the dreams grew stronger, and with them came the whispers, "She suffers, she cries, and you must end her pain." He believed he was guided by compassion when he placed his hands around the throat of the woman he claimed to love. In court, he wept and insisted, "I wanted only to set her free." Here you see the shadow, unrecognized, projecting itself into dreams, transforming empathy into murder. The empath's gift became the criminal's justification. This is the first truth I must reveal to you. The shadow does not come in the form of a monster recognizable to the conscious mind. It comes as a whisper of righteousness, as the illusion that one is acting for love, for justice, for mercy. And because the empath feels so deeply, he is often the least prepared to suspect that his feelings can be manipulated by unconscious forces. He believes his tenderness to be incorruptible, but it is precisely his innocence that makes him vulnerable. He does not question the shadow. He mistakes it for his own heart. When I speak of the shadow, I speak of the reservoir of all we reject in ourselves, the impulses we deny, the rage we repress, the lust we hide. It lives not in the cellar of the psyche, but in its foundation. It is not evil in itself, for it contains also our unclaimed vitality, our untapped creativity, our unlived life. But when it is denied, it turns malignant, and when it finds an outlet in an overly sensitive soul, it disguises itself as empathy. You will feel you are suffering for others, but in truth, You are enacting your own darkness through them. Imagine again the man who killed in the name of love. In his dreams, the shadow was always faceless. Why faceless? Because it was his own face he refused to see. He had projected his aggression, his fear of abandonment, onto a phantom, and the phantom commanded him to destroy. The criminal empath is not one who lacks feeling, but one who is ruled by feelings that belong not to the conscious ego, but to the shadow. And so his empathy becomes a channel through which the shadow acts in secret. This is why I have always warned, we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The criminal empath is a tragic proof of this law. Sensitivity without shadow work is like leaving the doors of your house open in a storm. Anything may enter, and once it does, it will wear your clothing and speak with your voice. You will think it is you, and yet it is not. And so I tell you, do not trust the first voice of empathy. Examinate. Ask, who is speaking? Is it truly the self, or is it the shadow wearing the mask of virtue? Do not believe that compassion exempts you from darkness. On the contrary, it makes you its prime target. For the unconscious, indifferent to your moral preferences, seeks expression, and if you do not grant it conscious expression through reflection, through art, through acknowledgement, it will find expression in action, actions that terrify you when you awaken to their consequences. Tonight, as I look into your eyes, I see many who fear the possibility that what I am saying is true. You have trusted your sensitivity. You have worn it like a badge of honor, perhaps even a shield. But shields can become cages, and cages can become traps. And when the shadow holds the key, it does not free you. It condemns you. The empath, who does not confront his own darkness, may one day awaken to find himself standing over a crime scene, asking how his tenderness became brutality. This is only the beginning of our descent. We have seen the shadow, faceless, commanding, but the unconscious speaks also in dreams, and dreams are not harmless phantoms. They are the royal road, yes, but also the dark corridor through which unconscious obsessions march into waking life. And when the criminal empath dreams, he dreams not for himself alone, but for the crimes that the collective shadow whispers through him. Let us turn now, slowly, into the domain of dreams, where snakes slither through labyrinths, where repetition becomes compulsion, where the empath becomes the criminal through the dream's decree. The dream is not an ornament of the night. It is a decree from the depths. When the empath dreams, he does not merely experience private fantasy, he becomes the host for images that have existed long before his birth. The dream is older than his consciousness, older than his culture, older even than language. It speaks with symbols, with the language of the soul, which the conscious mind resists, but the body and instincts obey without question. This is why so many crimes have been birthed in sleep, before they were enacted in daylight. The empath who does not understand his dreams is like a blind man led by the hand of a stranger through a burning house. He feels the heat, but he does not know where he is being taken. I recall the chilling case of a young man who, from adolescence, dreamed the same labyrinth. In the dream, he wandered endless corridors, walls damp with moisture, torches flickering with a dim flame that gave no warmth, and always at the center, a snake coiled upon itself, its eyes gleaming like 2 drops of black oil. The snake never attacked him. It waited, patient, eternal. He awoke drenched in sweat, his heart pounding. Yet, strangely compelled to return each night, the labyrinth, with its twists and dead ends, mirrored the structure of his psyche, convoluted, repressed, filled with unacknowledged desires. The snake was not a literal reptile, but the primordial image of instinct, of transformation, of danger entwined with knowledge. For years, he lived peacefully enough. He studied, worked, fell in love, but the dream never left him. Instead, it grew more insistent, more vivid, until the waking world seemed pale in comparison. And then came the obsession. He began to draw the labyrinth in notebooks, on walls, even on the skin of his arms. The snake appeared in his speech, in his metaphors. He told friends, "Something inside me wants to shed its skin." They laughed, but the laughter only deepened his isolation. Finally, one night, after a particularly violent quarrel with his lover, he strangled her and whispered, "You are the snake. I had to release you." He believed he had fulfilled the command of the dream. As if the unconscious itself had demanded sacrifice, here we see the criminal empath not as a cold-blooded predator, but as a dreamer ensnared by symbols he could not interpret. He mistook the snake for the other, rather than recognizing it as his own inner transformation unmet, his own instinctual energy denied. Had he confronted the dream consciously, had he seen that the labyrinth was his unexamined psyche, that the snake was his unintegrated sexuality, rage, and power, he might have been transformed. But by denying interpretation, by refusing consciousness, he allowed the dream to dictate reality. The empathic sensitivity that made him vulnerable to the pain of others also made him susceptible to the command of archetypal images. He absorbed not only human suffering, but the voices of the collective unconscious, and in doing so, became the instrument of its shadow. You must understand, dreams do not care for morality. They are not sermons, but revelations. They bring forth what the conscious mind rejects. And when a person lives only by feeling, by sensitivity, by the immediate vibration of others' emotions, then dreams become law. The criminal empath is ruled not by logic, not by ideology, but by the dream's compulsion. He says, "I felt it was right," but the feeling was seeded by an archetype, a primordial image rising from depths beyond his comprehension. This is why Empathy without reflection becomes a dangerous trap. It confuses the language of symbols with the voice of conscience. It follows the snake instead of recognizing the snake as a mirror. Some of you tremble at this thought. You recall your own recurring dreams of water, of fire, of endless pursuit. You wonder, do they command me too? And I tell you, they do, unless you claim them. The dream not confronted becomes fate. The dream not interpreted becomes destiny, and destiny, when unconscious, often manifests in crime, in destruction, in suffering. The empath who does not analyze his dreams is at the mercy of images that will eventually demand blood, whether metaphorical or literal. To feel the pain of others is noble, but to be possessed by dreams without reflection is perilous. You become a criminal, not against the law alone, but against your own soul. The young man with the labyrinth was not born evil. He was born sensitive, fragile, porous to the images of the unconscious. But his failure was his refusal to speak with the dream, to wrestle with it, to hold the snake in his hands as a symbol rather than as a command. That is what I urge you to do. When the dream speaks, do not obey, interpret, do not act, reflect, do not surrender to its compulsion, transform it into meaning. The unconscious offers images, not instructions. Only the conscious mind, illuminated by reflection, can discern the difference. And so, my friends, we descend deeper from the shadow, faceless and commanding, to the dream. Insistent and symbolic, we see how empathy becomes entrapment. But the unconscious does not end here. Beneath the dreams lie the archetypes, the eternal patterns that shape human behavior, that give rise to myths, religions, revolutions, and crimes. And when the empath is seized not only by his own shadow, not only by his own dreams, but by the archetypal image of the hero, the martyr, the avenger, then the criminal empath does not merely kill one person, he may destroy nations in the name of salvation. This is the domain into which we must now step, the most dangerous of all, the archetype that turns sensitivity into fanaticism, empathy into terror, the individual into the distorted vessel of collective myth. When we descend beyond shadow and dream, we encounter forces that are older than any individual psyche. The archetypes, these are not inventions of the mind, but primordial patterns that live in the collective unconscious. They are the gods hidden in our blood, the timeless images that rise unbidden and command entire civilizations. They are not personal, they are universal. And when an empath is seized by an archetype, his sensitivity becomes not only dangerous, but apocalyptic. For he feels not merely the pain of a neighbor, but the burden of the entire myth that seeks embodiment through him. I once studied the case of a man who called himself a warrior of God. He was no ordinary criminal. He was a student, intelligent, capable of tenderness, known for helping the poor and comforting the lonely. His empathy was not feigned, it was genuine. But in his heart burned the image of the hero, an archetype as old as Gilgamesh, as enduring as Christ, as fierce as Achilles. He began to dream of battles, of fires that consumed cities, of voices crying for deliverance. And he believed with all the fervor of the possessed that he had been chosen to carry out a holy mission. To him, the archetype spoke with the voice of God. In truth, it was the collective shadow of his people. Seeking blood, one day, he took a weapon into a marketplace, declaring he was saving his nation, purifying his people, avenging their suffering. The empath had become a terrorist. He did not kill because he lacked empathy. He killed because his empathy had fused with the archetype of the warrior. He felt the collective pain of his tribe, his religion, his imagined destiny, and in feeling it so deeply, he became its instrument. He believed himself a martyr, but in reality he was the mouthpiece of an archetype demanding sacrifice. Do you see the trap? The criminal empath, when seized by archetypes, no longer distinguishes between self and collective, between compassion and compulsion. He becomes the battlefield where myths play themselves out. The hero archetype is noble when it inspires courage, but when unconscious, it becomes fanaticism. The mother archetype nurtures when integrated, but becomes suffocating and murderous when distorted. The archetypes are not evil, they are eternal forms of psychic life, but they become destructive when mistaken for personal commands. The terrorist I speak of did not recognize that the hero within him was a symbol, not a literal instruction. Had he reflected, he might have seen that the battle he was called to fight was internal. The battle with his own despair, his own shadow, his own longing for meaning, but he surrendered to the archetype, let it fill his veins, and acted it out upon the world. His sensitivity made him feel the cries of his people. His unconsciousness made him believe he was their savior. Thus, empathy became the mask of violence. And the archetype became a tyrant. I must tell you, there is no greater danger than the archetype mistaken for destiny. When the empath, porous and vulnerable, encounters the great myths of humanity, he is like a child handling fire. He believes the flame to be warmth alone, forgetting it can also consume. The unconscious does not care for innocence. It demands recognition. And if you refuse to see the archetype as symbol, it will insist on becoming flesh, wars, revolutions, massacres. All are fueled by archetypes acting through men who believed themselves chosen, compelled, righteous. You may think, this is far from you, that only extremists fall prey to such possession. But I warn you, the archetypes live in each of you. Who among you has not dreamed of being the savior in a moment of crisis? Who has not felt in the intimacy of suffering that your pain is the world's pain, that you must act with extraordinary sacrifice, This is the whisper of the archetype. The empath hears it louder than most because his sensitivity draws the collective into his very marrow without consciousness, without reflection. He cannot distinguish between his own call and the voice of the ancient hero urging him toward destruction. The archetypes do not vanish when denied. They grow in power. They appear in art, in religion, in politics. They animate nations, mobs, and cults. And the criminal empath, when seized by them, believes he is living a divine drama. He is not a cynic, not a liar, not even primarily selfish. He is possessed. He acts with sincerity, and that sincerity is what makes him dangerous. The cold killer can be predicted. The fanatic cannot. The cold killer wants money, revenge, control. The fanatic wants to embody God, which, I ask you, is more terrifying. You must learn to see archetypes as mirrors, not masters. They are guides when you reflect upon them, demons when you obey them blindly. The terrorist who called himself a warrior of God was a man who mistook the hero archetype for his vocation. He projected his inner battle onto the world, and countless lives were extinguished. His empathy was real. He felt the wounds of his people, but he had not asked the deeper question. Is the Savior I dream of outside me or within? Had he asked, he might have seen that his true task was to save his own soul from despair, not to destroy others in the name of salvation. And so I tell you, beware of myths that claim you as their vessel. Beware of dreams that make you the chosen one. The unconscious is vast, and archetypes are its kings. To live without reflection is to become their slave. To integrate them is to become human. The empath must be doubly vigilant, for his heart is open, and through that opening the collective unconscious pours like a flood. Without a vessel strong enough to contain it, the flood will sweep him into madness, fanaticism, and crime. Now, let us descend yet further. We have seen the shadow whispering through dreams, the archetypes thundering through nations. But the story is not yet complete. There is another mask, more subtle, more insidious. The persona, the mask you wear before society, the role you play, the face you present. The empath, eager to please, eager to belong, often polishes this mask until it shines, but behind the mask festers what is denied, and sometimes the mask itself cracks, revealing the monstrous face beneath. The criminal empath may not be a terrorist, but a deceiver one, who smiles with sympathy while living a secret life of corruption and cruelty. This, too, we must confront. The mask, it is perhaps the most dangerous of all disguises, because unlike the shadow, which lurks in the depths, or the dream, which intrudes from the night, the mask is worn proudly in daylight. The persona is not merely deception, it is adaptation. It is the way you speak to society, the role you play to be accepted, respected, even admired. Without the persona, You would be naked before the crowd, vulnerable to its cruelty, but when the empath becomes too enamored of his mask, when his identity fuses with the smiling face he shows to the world, then the truth of his inner chaos is buried. And what is buried does not die. It festers. The criminal empath who lives through the persona becomes a contradiction, a savior in public, a predator in secret. I recall the story of a financier, a man of elegant speech, impeccable manners, and boundless generosity. He sponsored charities, built schools, and wept openly at the suffering of others. His employees adored him, his community trusted him. The newspapers praised his philanthropy. He was, to all appearances, an empathic soul in the world of commerce, a man whose success was merely the foundation for his benevolence, yet behind the closed doors of his office, and deeper still in the chambers of his own psyche, he painted. His paintings were not the gentle landscapes his admirers might have expected, but grotesque visions, twisted faces, eyes without pupils, bodies contorted in anguish. He never showed these works to anyone. They were, in truth, his dialogue with the shadow he dared not reveal. As the years passed, his financial empire grew vast, but it was built not on honest trade, but on fraud, on lies, on theft, on the silent destruction of those who trusted him most. When his empire collapsed, thousands were ruined. Some even took their own lives. And when investigators entered his private studio, they found the paintings. Each canvas was a prophecy, a confession that had been ignored. The persona was the saintly benefactor, but the shadow had always been present, expressing itself in secret art and secret crime. He was an empath. Yes, he cried for the poor, for the sick, for the dispossessed, but his sensitivity was bound to a mask, and the mask allowed him to hide the corruption within until it devoured him and all who depended upon him. Do you see now how empathy can be weaponized by the persona? The empath wears the mask of compassion, and society believes the tears are real, but they are not the whole story. Beneath them may lie envy, rage, hunger for power. The criminal empath does not always know he's lying. Sometimes he believes the mask more than anyone else. He convinces himself that his fraudulent empire is justified by his philanthropy, that the lives ruined are outweighed by the schools built. He paints grotesque images at night, but tells himself they are only dreams of stress, not revelations of his true psyche. Thus the mask is not only a deception of others, it is a deception of the self. And self-deception is the most insidious form of evil. You must understand the persona is necessary. Without it, we cannot function in society. But when we identify with it completely, when we mistake the role for the soul, then the unconscious rises in protest. The empath who clings to the persona becomes a sponge for the world's admiration and the world's expectations. until the repressed truth erupts. And when it erupts, it does so, not with honesty, but with violence. Fraud or madness, the persona cracks, and behind it is revealed a face even the empath himself did not recognize. The financier's grotesque paintings are the key. They show us that the unconscious never remains silent. Even when the mask shines, the shadow speaks in symbols, in art, in dreams, in compulsions. If you ignore these messages, if you silence them, they will eventually break through in acts of destruction. The criminal empath is not born in darkness alone. He is born in the refusal to look behind the mask. His empathy, his tears, his generosity become alibis for the shadow's work, until at last the edifice collapses and all see the ruin that was hidden behind the smile. And so I tell you, do not despise your persona, but do not worship it either. Play your roles, yes, but know they are roles. Behind the teacher, the doctor, the philanthropist, the lover, there is a soul that must face its shadow. If you forget this, then your empathy becomes a mask for corruption, and your sensitivity a cloak for crime. Integration is the only cure to bring the paintings into the light, to speak the unspeakable, to confess the grotesque before it becomes monstrous. Otherwise, the mask will betray you, and society will see not the savior you pretended to be, but the fraud, the deceiver, the criminal empath who destroyed others while pretending to save them. Now, my friends, we have traveled through shadow, dream, archetype, and persona, but our descent is not yet complete. There is a level beneath even the personal unconscious, a realm deeper than any individual psyche, the collective unconscious. Here dwell not merely symbols, but the living currents of humanity itself. Here empathy does not bind you to one person, but to the mass, the mob, the crowd. And when the empath is overtaken by the collective, his individuality dissolves. He no longer feels one person suffering. He feels the rage of thousands. He becomes part of a riot, a revolution, a herd turned predator. The criminal empath in this realm is no longer an individual criminal at all. He is the vessel of collective madness. It is here, in the collective unconscious, that sensitivity becomes most catastrophic, and entire civilizations burn